Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
Before we get into the meat of tonight's show, we got a whole lot of confirmations in for tour stop dates for the first part of 2014. So if you're going to be in any of the following areas, I would encourage you to make every effort to come out. We always have a great time. Going to do 4 cities in Arizona, mid-February. We've got some cities coming up in Texas. Looks like Amarillo is a possibility for March, San Antonio in June. Going to be in the San Diego area in mid-April. Don't forget the American Atheist National Convention is coming up in Salt Lake City in Mormon country the 3rd weekend of April. Going to be in Kamloops, British Columbia for the Imagine No Religion 4 conference. That's coming up in mid-May. And then it looks like North Carolina for several stops coming up in June. All that and more is online, thethinkingatheist.com/events. Now, I realize that the subject of tonight's show is really driven by an event that's going to be happening in just a few days. The upcoming Bill Nye-KEN Ham debate, which will take place at the Creation Museum February 4th, 2014. And I also realize that many of our listeners will catch this show in archive long after the live airing. It'll be long after February 2014 when they hear this discussion. So will it be relevant to them? And I'm really convinced it remains relevant because it speaks to sort of this larger umbrella question. Should scientists debate creationists? Is it a warranted and necessary discussion that ought to be had as often as possible in as public a venue as possible? Or are we giving undue credibility to people who believe in sky wizards and the talking snake? And this discussion has in many ways sort of even polarized the free thought community. We've got opinions all over the place. So we're going to hear many of those opinions tonight on the show. We'll hear from people like Matt Dillahunty of The Atheist Experience. Dr. Richard Carrier is going to stop by. AronRa, Greta, Christina. David Silverman, the president of American Atheists, is going to be part of the show tonight. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking with a buddy of mine in the Petersburg, Kentucky area. His name is Ed Hensley. He's wired in with the Louisville Atheists and Freethinkers and the Kentucky Secular Society. And he's no stranger to Ken Ham or his work. And he did some digging up there about not just the Creation Museum, but the construction that's going on or the project that's underway for the Ark Encounter, a Noah's Ark replica, which is being put together by Ken Ham and his organization. And there are some interesting connections between this debate and the funding of the Ark Encounter. So we're going to talk to Ed and sort of find out what he dug up. I'm going to start, though, with an article that was posted on the 16th of this month on the website of the Richard Dawkins Foundation. The author of the article, Dan Arel, A-R-E-L. And it says this: why Bill Nye shouldn't debate Ken Ham. This is a bad idea, and here is why, the article says. Debating creationists offer their position credibility. When you accept a debate, you're accepting there's something worth debating. Political ideologies are worth debating. Religion, as it pertains to things like human well-being or flourishing, can be worth debating, because these kinds of ideas claim to offer solutions to problems, and they're debating the best way to achieve them. Debates about the existence of God can be fun. They're not really that meaningful, but they are a debate about ideas and beliefs and can be worth the effort. Creationism versus evolution, however, is not worth debating. Why? Simple. There is nothing to debate. Evolution is a scientific fact, backed by mountains of evidence, peer-reviewed papers you could stack to the moon, and an incredible scientific community consensus. Creationism is a debunked mythology that is based solely in faith. It has 0 peer-reviewed papers to back up its claims. It has absolutely no scientific consensus and is not even considered science due to the fact that it cannot be tested. Why would a scientist debate this? Nye would do more good on his own going on TV and discussing evolution and the importance of scientific education instead of giving Ken Ham any publicity and a public forum with thousands, if not millions, of viewers to spew his dishonesty. Ham is a snake oil salesman, and Nye just offered him up an infomercial to sell his product. Ham can repeat his mantra over and over, teach the controversy. Another objection in the article, Nye is not a biologist. The author says, I don't know an incredible amount about Bill Nye other than I loved his show. However, a Google search only turned up that Nye has nothing more than a bachelor's degree in engineering and 3 honorary doctorate degrees. We fault Christian apologists almost daily for trying to ride their honorary degrees. It would seem only fair we hold Nye to the same standard. So we have Nye, a very smart man with a degree in engineering, not biology, not anthropology, and he does not practice any form of research science. Nye should be credited greatly for his work in education, but as a qualified candidate to defend evolution, especially against the likes of con men like Ken Ham, he is not. Another objection in the article, you must fully understand your opponent. This is mere speculation, but I have no reason to believe that Nye has the firm grasp on creationism that would be needed to go up against the likes of someone like Ham. To win a debate successfully, you must understand your opponent's position better than they do. In fact, you should know it well enough that you could debate for them. Creationists have no rules. Their dishonesty stops nowhere. Nye will attempt to use proper science and reason to bring down Ham, but Ham will care little for any facts or evidence and will stick to nonsense and will feed on audience ignorance and use terms like irreducible complexity to confuse the watchers into thinking he's made a valid point. Key phrases like half a wing will fly from his lips as he openly ignores science's amazing understanding of the evolution of things like the eye or wings. Ham will be relying on faith and pushing the biblical teachings onto the viewers and will attempt to call out any time science could have been wrong or tear down its credibility. The article goes on. I'll post the link to this article in the description box of this show. Now, coming up in just a few minutes, I'm going to share part of another article that actually defends this debate and says it is a good thing, their words. And that article was posted recently on the website of the American Humanist Association. And so we'll share part of that. Right now, let's talk to a guy who, of course, is no stranger to this show, and he's no stranger to the arena of debate. He is host of the Atheist Experience television show. His name, of course, is Matt Dillahunty. Matt, glad you're here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I know you're watching this upcoming Bill Nye Ken Ham debate, and I know you got an opinion, and I want to hear it. I mean, is it a freaking waste of time? Is he giving Ken Ham a spotlight? Is he giving him too much attention, or is this going to be a win in the science category in the end?
Well, I wish I could predict the future, but I can't. The only thing I can do is kind of guess at it, and I'm disappointed by many of the things surrounding this debate, kind of how it's being done, and that it's potentially a big fundraiser for the Creation Museum, which was evidently having financial problems. I like Bill Nye. I think he's a great personality, a great science communicator. When I see him engaging people in, miniature debates on television, he tends to do a good job. Although I'm probably a little biased since we already agree on the facts. But I don't know anything about how he's done in an actual formal full-length debate. And they're not about who has the best facts or, who's even necessarily the best presenter of those facts. There's a lot of personality and there's theater. And I think Bill's got those things. I just don't know that really is going to matter much in this case if he doesn't have a lot of experience dealing with creationists who are going to go, into a Gish Gallop and dump out 100 things to think about, and you're not going to be able to rebut them all.
No matter what happens, each side is going to claim victory. We can see that train coming. Is the debate really about the facts being presented on the stage, or is it more of a popularity contest?
It's really kind of hard to say, because I've seen debates where everybody takes the side that they came in on initially. I've seen a few occasions where people, at least on our side, tend to look at it honestly and say, so-and-so didn't perform particularly well. I've done couple debates against Cliff Connectley. And the first one, I pretty much sat there like a lump. I'd been sick, and I just kind of read my stuff. And it would be easy for somebody to look at that and say that I lost, irrespective of who presented accurate information and who just preached. So it's hard to say what the actual response is going to be. One of the things that when I do debates, I realize, yes, there's people who are going to look at it as a win or a lose situation. And I try not to do that. I mean, I try to make sure that whatever debate performance I give is as good as it can be. It don't always succeed. But I want the audience to be entirely full of people who disagree with me so that I can reach as many as possible, so that they can't ever say, oh, I've never heard an atheist who's thoughtful. I've never heard an atheist who, presented their arguments well. I've never heard any of this stuff. Whether or not they think I won or lost, or whether they changed their mind is really kind of secondary. And as far as people running around pronouncing, oh, so-and-so won or so-and-so slaughtered, I mean, they killed him. That does happen, but I don't tend to focus on that. I mean, Matt Slick called into the Atheist Experience. We had about a 45-minute debate on the TV show about the transcendental argument for the existence of God. And I wasn't about to say, I completely slaughtered him and killed him. But Matt did. Matt ran off to his radio show and claimed unmitigated victory and that I was just an embarrassment. And people called him out on it. And the same things happened to me when I debated at UMBC. We debated morality against Father Jacobsy. And the next day he was on Christian radio, and they were claiming that not only did he win, but that it looked like I had never even thought about this subject. And the debate's online on YouTube. Anybody who wants to go and take an objective look is free to do so. This thing about claiming who won is far less important to me than, did we actually present information well? Did we potentially reach somebody? And so there's a debate that I did in Amarillo where there were 700 people showed up. And at the end of it, a young boy came up to me and said, my mom and dad are non-religious, but they've taken me around and exposed me to a bunch of different views so that I could find my own identity. And after tonight's debate, I'm comfortable identifying as an atheist. And to me, I didn't care who else thought I won or lost. Reaching that one young man was just enough.
Well, I'm still trying to get a beat on your take on the Ken Ham Bill Nye thing.
So there's a part of me that thinks that this is just a mistake because it's about raising funds for the Creation Museum, not only through their sales of actual tickets that people are going to show up, but they're going to be having people pay, I think, $5 to watch it stream online. And they're also going to be charging for a DVD that they're going to put out, is my understanding of this. Now, part of me just looks at that and cringes because there's a whole lot of money potentially being directed at the Creation Museum. The other thing is that one of the reasons that I do debates is that I hope that they will live on the internet, on DVD, on somebody's site, so that people for many, many years to come can look at them and get something out of them. And I think one of the best things we can possibly do with this debate is to get a copy of what took place and to use clips from that to both teach people how to debate and to expand on the points that were made and not made. I mean, that's probably about the best use of it I can think of. I'm cautiously optimistic that Bill will do a good job, but like I said, I haven't seen him in any big debates.
How about the larger picture beyond this particular event? Whenever, I don't know, Christopher Hitchens would get on stage with Dinesh D'Souza, or, I mean, Christopher Hitchens wasn't a scientist, but let's say a scientist, Richard Dawkins, goes on stage with Deepak Chopra. Do you think those are productive encounters?
Well, it depends. I mean, I've got to kind of consider every one of them independently. I mean, as much as I love Hitchens and his debating skills, I wouldn't say that I think he won every debate that he walked into. I kind of thinking of one potential example where I think that he lost the debate, but it didn't bother me a whole lot because there was still good information that got out.
If Deepak Chopra is talking about all sorts of crazy pseudoscientific nothing, he's talking about the quantum, and he's way off in woo-woo territory. And let's say I'm a scientist, and I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? And they say, hey, would you go and have a debate? Am I giving him exposure. I mean, there may not be any such thing as bad publicity for this guy, right? Especially if there's a chance he may not be a true believer. Maybe he's just selling books. There's no such thing as bad publicity. I mean, that has to be taken into account, yes?
Well, I think so. And that's a concern that's raised over and over again is, you're just giving them credibility. And by and large, I agree with Dawkins and other scientists who aren't going to engage with creationists in debate because it tends to give the impression of elevating the creationist position beyond where it should be. I mean, if they want to be considered equal with actual science, then they should have to do the actual work of coming up with a hypothesis, investigating it, publishing the results, and having those things peer-reviewed and independently verified until, that's the way we get to our knowledge about the universe. And if we just take every crackpot idea, the Earth is a balloon that has inflated, is one I've seen for explaining continental drift. And there's a guy sitting on his couch with stickers of the continents on a deflated balloon, and then he blows it up to show how this perfectly supposedly explains continental drift. And if the world's preeminent geologists were to engage in a debate, that would just look completely silly. On the other hand, Dawkins and Deepak Chopra both have incredibly good name recognition. They both are very popular. So as far as who's already in the public mind, Deepak probably has an edge there. And while I wouldn't necessarily encourage Dawkins to engage in a debate with Deepak Chopra, it's not like Deepak's some unheard of crackpot. He is this well heard of, incredibly famous crackpot. So he's already got a platform to get his ideas out to people. And when that's the case, I have no problem with sharing that platform to knock down those ideas so that people who haven't done the legwork can benefit from the knowledge of others.
It also must be said they're not teaching the deflated balloon theory in the majority of private Christian schools here in the United States of America. I mean, you probably have to fight where the enemy is. The bad information, the bad science is largely an ID or creationist angle here in the United States, and I think that's probably why it's most often addressed. What makes a good debater, Matt Dillahunty? What should someone do to be their best in the arena of debate, on stage or even one-on-one, in your opinion?
I've kind of changed the way I do debates over time, and I won't run around claiming that I'm the best at it or I'm great at it. But what I think makes for good debates is someone who is thoughtful, quick on their feet, engaging, entertaining, humorous, and someone who can display a passion for the subject. And that's why I'm not panicking about Bill Nye, because I think those are some of the characteristics that he has. And, everybody's got to have their first big debate. I'm just not necessarily sure this is the one that I'd have chosen for anybody to be their first debate. What I've started doing, if you look at like the last debate that I did, I did this a little stronger. And that is, when you get done with an hour and a half, 2 hours of debating, the people who walked in are going to pretty much have the same views that they had when they walked in most cases. And they're going to be processing parts of what was said. They're not going to process everything that was said. There are going to be certain bits of information that stick in their head. And so when you get to the closing, I think one of the best things you can do is do a quick summary of what happened. He presented all of these claims, and I tried my best to address them. I acknowledged where I didn't know an answer and where the best answer for all of us should be, I don't know, but let's go find out. I presented information as best I could, whereas my opponent stood up here and preached sermons or just made a whole bunch of claims or tossed out information. Which of those two processes best represents how we should go about figuring out what's real? And then pick, one or two little things that you definitely want to have them stick in their head in the closing. It's this idea of repetition, of I'm going to say something at the beginning, I'm going to repeat it a couple times throughout in different ways, and I'm going to hit it again in the closing. And, I've seen people say, I don't know how you could have the closing remarks for your debate written out ahead of time. That just doesn't sound like a debate to me. You have to be responding to what your opponent says. And I agree. But if you don't have thoughts already compiled, not to read, but to express for almost anything your opponent can bring up, then you probably don't know the subject matter well enough to actually be engaged in the debate.
It's a difficult and sometimes unpopular thing to say, too, as well. And right or wrong, I believe it is a fact of life. Quite often, how palatable the information is directly related to the conduit for that information. If you've got a genius on stage who is giving you really deep and really well-vetted scientific information, and the audience has no personal connection to him at all, no relatability, as we used to say in broadcasting. There's no relate there. Well, you've got great information, but it's clinical and cold, and the audience disconnects. Quite often, it does matter if the person on stage can develop some kind of relationship with the people sitting in the seats. I mean, that's just the way it is.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think part of that is the theater aspect of debate, which I don't say theater in the sense of being phony. I hope that whoever's up there is actually sincere and passionate, and that sincere passion comes through. The last thing you want is for your audience to get bored and think about something other than what you're talking about. And when you're trying to present potentially dense scientific information that many people don't have the background to be able to consider, it's difficult. If I'm presenting something that would be a dry science paper that people have even almost been trained to go to sleep to, I better have a better way of doing this. And that's why, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a great science communicator. That's why you see him on television all the time, because he has a way of presenting information that doesn't put people to sleep. And you can tell that the guy is passionate about it and cares. And I think Bill Nye is in the same category. I mean, at least for those of us who, I'm a little old to have grown up with it, but I certainly did grow up a little bit watching Bill Nye the Science Guy. I mean, it's fun. And if he takes that sort of energy and that ability to explain complicated scientific information in a way that almost anybody can grab, and shows that he's passionate and he knows, and he's addressing his opponent's points, and his opponent isn't addressing his in response, I think that's going to be the key.
I feel that way about Professor Brian Cox, when he's on television doing his thing or giving a speech. I think this guy is passionate about science, and he's a brilliant communicator, and people relate to him. They feel like he's a friend, which is something, it's an intangible not all people can pull off. I know you certainly have. By the way, Matt has been kind enough to join AronRa and me for like a very limited tour that we're going to be doing, and I'm just going to shamelessly plug it here. By the way, I put the tour poster up last week, just a coming soon poster, and as a gag, we're calling it the Unholy Trinity. Now, I talked to the guys about this, right? I said, Matt, Aaron, people are going to go there. They have a sense of humor, or are they going to flip out? And I think we all came away thinking, the people that flip out probably aren't going to participate anyway. And so we went ahead and went with the Unholy Trinity tour. And I'll tell you, the response already on Facebook's been freaking huge. Everybody's excited about the chance to come out and kind of see this. It's just going to be a casual deal. Matt, myself, Aaron, just kind of doing what we do. These guys, I admire their work so much. So, Matt, thanks for agreeing to slum to be a part of the event.
No slumming here at all. I appreciate it. And, you already know how I feel about you and the work that you're doing. So this Unholy Trinity thing is going to be a lot of fun. My biggest concern wasn't that people would have the sort of reaction to it of being in opposition to religious type stuff, but I was concerned of comparison to the Four Horsemen. Oh, you've got, this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just the three of us, because we live fairly close together, having some fun and hopefully engaging some people in a way that makes people want to do more.
I did wonder if some people would think, look, they're calling themselves deities. Well, I wonder which one's the Father, which one's the Son, which one's the Holy. We don't take ourselves that seriously. Honestly, it's just a great hook, and it's going to be a great time. And the cities will be eventually announced on the thinkingatheist.com events page. Those details are still coming in, but it's going to be 3 cities in the next 6 months. Matt, thanks so much for the work that you do. Honestly, I'm really considering, I don't want to put you on the spot here on the radio, but I'm really wondering if we might do a show down the way, for lack of a better title, debate workshop, or how to debate, or tips for debating theists, that kind of thing, just to maybe tool people up, including myself, for how we can best prepare, what pitfalls to avoid, how we can be most effective in the arena of ideas out there. Would that be something you might be interested in? Is there enough to do there? What do you think?
Not only am I interested in it, there are ideas like this in the works. I'm currently transitioning. Well, I'm looking for a new job. My day job kind of closed down, so I've got to kind of focus on that. But while I don't have anything I can talk about here today or announce, I'll tell you something off the record, off the air, about what's potentially going on.
Well, I don't want to step on toes. If you've already got something going on, what I'd rather do is wait till you guys get your thing together and I'll promote that, But I think we would all benefit from your expertise. You just do a lot of it and you're good at it. And damn it, every time I have a theist in my own circle, people say, geez, Matt would have done that so much better, you bastard.
That's simply not true. They are wrong.
Matt Dillahunty, thanks so much for your perspective on an interesting topic. We'll see what happens here in February with Bill Nye and Ken Ham. Take care of yourself, all right?
Thanks.
I guess I may be like a lot of people. I know about Bill Nye the Science Guy from the TV show, but I don't know a lot about Bill Nye. I mean, I've seen him on the Big Think videos as of late, especially going after creation, and he's made the headlines and whatnot. But what his story is, who he is, where he's from, I must admit I didn't know a whole lot. And his story really is pretty interesting. He's got a degree in mechanical engineering from Cornell University. He worked at Boeing, and in fact, he invented or developed a part, some sort of a horizontal stabilizer drive system for the Boeing 747 that is still being used today, and had an amazing love for flight, I guess, even as a kid. He also won a Steve Martin lookalike contest back in the day, and did stand-up comedy. So he had like a dual career. He was a stand-up comedian on stage at night, and he was a mechanical engineer by day. And these careers ultimately sort of came close to merging, I guess, his love for mechanics and how things work and whatnot. He became Bill Nye the Science Guy, and the TV show took off and became sort of a staple of children's programming. The show won 18 Emmys in 5 years. He's written 5 children's books. His latest is called Bill Nye's Great Big Book of Tiny Germs. 3 shows he's currently involved in right now. He served for the past several years as the vice president of the Planetary Society, which is the world's largest space interest group, and he speaks all around the world. So he's really an interesting guy, and it will be interesting, no matter how it shakes out, I think it will be interesting to see how he performs against Ken Ham on stage. Another perspective I wanted to get on this comes from someone who you probably know from Free Thought blog. She speaks all around the country, and I asked her to just sort of chime in for a few minutes tonight on this upcoming debate. Greta, Christina, so glad you found a few minutes to spend with us tonight. Good to have you.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Real fast before we get into the meat of the discussion here, don't you have a book coming out here? You're about to release something here this spring. What's going on?
Yeah, in April, I am releasing my new book, Coming Out Atheist, How to Do It, How to Help Each Other, and Why. It's a basic how-to guide on coming out as an atheist to the people in your life.
I think we may hook up with you here when we get closer to the release date. It's a topic that we seem to hit at least once a year because it's so relevant to people. But right now we're talking about the debate arena, specifically scientists debating creationists. What brought it about, obviously, was the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate, which seems to have really divided free thinkers. Some people say it's a great idea. Some people say it's a horrible idea. And I wanted to get your take. What do you think?
Well, I think that there's 2 different questions here that are being discussed, and sometimes they're getting conflated. There's the question of whether Bill Nye specifically should debate Ken Ham, and then there's the more general question about whether anybody who accepts the theory of evolution as the reality that it is should ever debate creationists, at least in a public forum. And I think that those are 2 different discussions, and I think it's worth separating them. I mean, on the question of whether anybody who accepts evolution should do public debates with creationism, I think it's actually kind of a tricky question, and I can kind of see both sides. I can see the side that says that this legitimizes creationism. It makes it seem like it's a topic that's worth debating, which it's not. The evidence is in. The evidence has been in for decades, and that a debate makes it seem like it's a legitimate topic. On the other hand, there's other people who say, to the people who believe creationism, it already is legitimate. We can't legitimize it any more than that. And that if we're going to persuade people out of it, we need to be willing to take that fight to the ground. And on that question, honestly, I would just like to see some evidence. I'd like to see some polling numbers on whether these debates work. I would like to see some polling numbers on whether people, and probably it's not going to happen right after the debate, but whether people actually do change their minds about creationism, in part because of having heard debates about it. And I don't really know whether any research or polling like that has been done. And I think that people will always say, oh, it's never going to change anybody's mind. These people are entrenched. But think about all the atheists who used to be believers. Think about all the atheists who used to be hardcore young earth creationists and who are persuaded not only out of creationism, but out of religion entirely, at least in part because of arguments that were made against creationism, either private arguments with people in their lives or public debates, either online or in person. And I think it's a mistake to think that these arguments never work. The big question that I have is, are these kinds of public debates between famous creationists and famous people who accept reality, do they actually have an effect? And I don't know the answer to that, and I would like to reserve judgment on that larger question until I have an answer to that.
Well, I'm one of those people who stumbled upon a debate between Christopher Hitchens and Rabbi Shmuley Botiak, and it was that debate that provided the catalyst for my own apostasy. So I get how debates can really ripple out, and, they're really not about changing the mind of your antagonist. More than anything, they're about the people who are watching in the wings. I totally get that. But, Richard Dawkins takes a really hard line. He says he won't stand on stage with a creationist because it would be like an obstetrician who is essentially debating with a proponent of the stork theory of birth. He thinks it legitimizes it. And I think he probably looks at the Ken-Ham-Bill Nye debate through that same lens.
I totally see Dr. Dawkins' point of view about it legitimizing. The big question I have and that I really don't have an answer to is, does this change people's minds? And I keep thinking about, I have a friend and colleague, John Corvino, who's a philosophy professor and a gay man, and he debates Maggie Gallagher, who's the head of the National Organization of Marriage, about same-sex marriage. And he's done this big public debate circuit about this topic. I think they're writing a book together about it. And I would argue that, the question of same-sex marriage is pretty darned resolved. I don't think that anybody from any kind of legitimate moral standpoint can oppose it. But the reality is that people do oppose it. And so the question is, do these debates help change people's minds? And does that counterbalance sort of whatever legitimacy it can give to the theory? Does it perhaps entrench other people even more deeply in their beliefs? And honestly, I'm going to be a skeptic here in the absence of evidence of, polling numbers about how debates affect people, both in the short term and the long term. I kind of want to reserve judgment. Now, I do have a pretty strong opinion on whether Bill Nye specifically should do this debate, and on that I think the answer is no. I think that debating is a very specific skill, and that you could be 100% right. You could be even more certain and with more facts and more evidence at your fingertips than Bill Nye almost certainly is about evolution, and I'm sure he's very, very well informed about it, and still lose at a debate, or still make yourself look foolish in a debate, and still make the other side look good in a debate if you don't have debating skills. I mean, I've seen people debate. I've seen people debate about religion and atheism and so on, and it's a very specific, very difficult skill. And I would never do it because I'm not any good at it. And I think that it's a mistake for Bill Nye to think that just because he has this information, that therefore, of course, he's going to whop the floor with Ken Ham.
Greta, Christina, who would you like to see in the debate arena? If not Bill Nye, who would you like to see go head-to-head with Ken Ham, if anyone?
That is a really good question.
Did I put you on the spot there? I mean, if nothing comes to mind, then you don't have to commit.
Honestly, I think my answer would be somebody who both has knowledge of evolution at their fingertips and who is skilled, experienced, trained debater. That's what I would like to see, and I don't know offhand who that would be, but that's what I would like to see.
I'll be watching with you to see what happens in February, and thanks for sounding off on that and the larger topic of debate. It's just an interesting point of discussion. All success with the upcoming book. We'll drop you a line here in a few months, and we'll talk after it comes out. Okay, Greta?
Would love to do that. Thank you so much for having me.
There were 2 articles that were posted on the website of the American Humanist Association in regard to the upcoming debate. and one was pro and one was con. And we've already addressed the against argument, so I wanted to address the pro argument. The article was posted by Maggie Ardiente, and it's called Why the Bill Nye-KEN Ham Debate is a Good Thing. And I'll just read a portion of it here. Examining the atheist humanist blogosphere, it's clear that many in the free thought movement are concerned that this event will give legitimacy to intelligent design theorists, while others think it's a waste of time trying to convince these already far gone new creationists. But is it? We need to do better than simply dismissing the creationist movement because it's not going away and it's doing real damage to the science community. According to Carl Giberson of the Daily Beast, Americans entered 2013 more opposed to evolution than they have been for years, with an amazing 46% embracing the notion that, quote, God created humans pretty much in their present form at one time in the last 10,000 years or so, unquote. This number was up a full 6% from the prior poll taken in 2010. Examining the poll further, the number of people who believe that humans evolved but God had no part in the process decreased by 1%. So despite the incredible scientific and technological advancements we've made in human history, including access to a wealth of information and knowledge about the world, the number of people who believe in creationism is actually going up. And that's even as the number of non-theists continues to rise. Apparently, even moderate religious people are susceptible to arguments from people like Ken Ham. Some argue that debating creationists is like debating people who believe in ghosts or fortune tellers, that their absurd ideas are harmless and unchangeable. But I don't see the pro-ghost advocates successfully intervening in public school science classrooms to teach the possible existence of the paranormal. Creationism is more than just a belief. It's a well-funded, influential movement, which aims to legitimize itself as a theory on the same level as evolution. State legislators in Colorado, Missouri, Montana, and Oklahoma are currently considering creationism bills, while a number of our elected officials in Congress hold views supporting intelligent design. The strategy to simply ignore intelligent design and hope it goes away is not going to work. If creationists are making inroads and changing people's minds to allow for such nonsense, we can tug the pendulum back the other way and open people's minds to real scientific evidence. Allowing intelligent design advocates to spread their message without strong rebuttals will gain more converts right under our nose. Is a debate the best format for changing minds? Maybe not. But it's already garnered national attention. It may not change the minds of people sitting in that auditorium, but the media coverage of the event might just be widespread enough for people to tune in and make up their own minds. And despite what you think about Ken Ham, he has a following. Answers in Genesis is a nearly $20 million operational organization. That's more than all the national free thought organizations in the entire movement combined. The Creation Museum, despite declining attendance, still managed to get over 250,000 people to walk through its doors. We can't just ignore them, just like we can't ignore prominent people who publicly hold anti-atheist bias. Dr. Nye has a huge following too, and that's why he's perfect for this debate as a respected scientist and evolution advocate. He'll be a terrific representative of the science and humanist communities. Frankly, this debate's going to be damn good entertainment. Hell, I wish I'd thought of it, and the American Humanist Association was hosting the debate ourselves. No doubt Bill Nye is going to lay the science smackdown, and I can't wait to see him in action, while Ken Ham undoubtedly fumbles with his ridiculous, faith-based claims. As Nye stated in his Humanist of the Year acceptance speech at the 2010 American Humanist Association Conference, quote, "Science is the best idea we've had so far. Got a better idea? Bring it on." Again, I'll post that link in the description box of this video if you'd like to go back and read it once again. Weighing in next on my sort of star-studded agenda tonight is a personal friend and a guy who's been doing battle against young Earth creationists in the state of Texas, along with Matt Dillahunty. His name is AronRa. Aaron, glad you're here.
My pleasure.
Well, we're talking about the big debate coming up in February, and I want to know, what do you think? I mean, it's Bill Nye on stage talking science, reason. No doubt he's going to be defending evolution in front of a young Earth creationist. What's your take on this exchange coming up?
Well, I think that there's some merit to debating big-name creationists like this. There needs to be a forum and a format that is appropriate for that, and I think there needs to be a person that is appropriate for that. And I love Bill Nye for the same reasons that everybody else does. You know, and I have a great deal of respect for what he's trying to do and the reason that he's trying to do it. But what I fear that he does not understand is that he is not going up against somebody that has the same credibility or concern for credibility that Nye does. I mean, we're talking about a presuppositionalist. We're talking about an apologist who openly advocates blinders and confirmation bias, who says that, you can put on your God glasses and automatically exclude all the evidence that is against you. And he has no problem at all saying that there's absolutely no data anywhere in existence that contradicts the young Earth creation model, when we all know that he knows better. Ken Ham has no scruples, no reservation to openly lying in defense of his position. And we know it's not just that he will misrepresent the facts, saying that there's no such thing as a transitional species, or arguing against anything, beneficial mutations, anything, whatever it takes to defend his position and argue against the classification. Taxonomy is a huge one. He does these educational videos where he says that apes are apes and humans are humans, and he forgets to mention that humans are a subset of apes, because that undermines the lies that he's trying to sell. He makes his living duping people who want to be duped. And the audience for Bill Nye is people who want to understand things better. And to that audience, Bill Nye does very well. But when he goes up against somebody who is, in my opinion, a very polished con man, then he's going to be playing a game of word salad. They're not going to go in with the same definitions. Everything means something else, and the goalposts will be constantly moving. I fear that Bill Nye is going to be walking into a madhouse, and he doesn't know it.
The deck is obviously going to be stacked in Ham's favor, right? It's going to be almost all young Earth creationist or fans of the Creation Museum, I think.
Oh, yes, and here's the thing. This is an important distinction that has to be made. It is not stacked in Ham's favor because it's being held on his own property, where he controls everything and where he has apparently, according to the reports I've gotten, been able to manipulate the audience to be the audience that he wants it to be, excluding certain other people, or at least seating them in questionable fashion. It's not that he owns and controls the venue that causes this to be completely stacked in his favor. If it were the case, then stacking the debate in our favor, we would have him come to a university and we would have our top scholars debate him, and we would put nothing but educated graduates and such in the audience. But that's not actually what we would do. If we want to hold this debate properly, the way real scientists would do it, what we would do would be to challenge him to produce the facts, which can then be verified and tested in peer review. We know that's the way science really works. It's not how you do your one-liners. It's not how eloquent a speaker you are before a live audience. It's whether you actually have the goods, and the things that you say are verifiably true. Every claim that the creationists make, all of them, fall into one of two categories. Proponents of evolution, all their claims fall into a different category. The two categories that creationist claims fall into are not evidently true and evidently not true. The category for evidently true is where all our stuff goes. And that's why the debate is stacked. It's stacked because this is an illusion. It's a game of equivocation and projection where they're going to try to turn the tables and upside down everything and then question, how does Bill Nye really even know that his name is Bill Nye? Because in all of these discussions with all these creationists, they want to argue that reality itself is wrong somehow, or that everything we know about reality could be wrong. Because since everything they know is wrong, then everything we know has to be wrong in order for them to be equal. And they really want to be seen as an equal status. We have a theory, they don't. So they want it to look like our theory is guesswork, just like their theory is empty, baseless speculation.
When I say stacked in his favor, I don't mean stacked in as far as the facts. I'm talking about applause lines. You know, the sound bites that you'll see on the highlight reel where somebody throws out a piece of red meat and the crowd goes wild. And wow, didn't Ken Ham score? And of course, most people who don't bother to go past the surface or are already convinced that they have been given divine truth through the leadings of the Holy Spirit or the word of Ken Ham, which many people may say are the same thing. I don't know. No. You know, they're going to be saying, wow, you can feel the momentum in Ken Ham's favor. He definitely does have the home field advantage here.
Yeah, now there are a couple of people that even given that home field advantage, there are a couple of people I can think of that had a very good a chance at overturning it. I went into a mega church, where there was a debate between Christopher Hitchens and Bill Dembski. And this is in a church, obviously very stacked. The audience was flooded with Christian schools from all over the place.
Is this the Prestonwood event that happened down in your neck of the woods down there in the Dallas area?
Yes, it is.
It is on YouTube. I encourage people to look it up. Yeah, he did an amazing job down there with that crowd.
He did so well that his opponent was crediting him with winning the debate before it was even over.
You and Ken Ham have been going round and round. Have you challenged Ken Ham to have a debate?
Not myself personally. Houston Atheists, the largest geographic meetup group of atheists, 2,200 members, found out that Ken Ham was going to be in Houston as the keynote speaker for a homeschool convention. And we all thought that was morbid to have a shyster like that, a complete charlatan, misleading children that way. So the Houston Atheists put out this challenge to invite Ken Ham to a debate. And originally it was going to be in the Houston Museum of Natural Science. And so nobody was going to be making any money off this. That's not what it was about. And of course, it was all about the facts and more or less, and not about money at all. But Ham refused. I mean, he accepted the debate at first, as long as it wasn't me. He said that he wanted to have somebody with a PhD. Why? So it would make him look better, because he needs to pull himself up by somebody else's bootstraps. In order to make himself look good, he needs to debate somebody that is an academic. And so P.Z. Myers piped up and said, well, he would be the PhD that debates. And Ham didn't want to debate himself either. He was going to put in one of his PhDs from his apologetics group. One of these people that started out as a creationist and then got a doctorate just so that they can undermine science from within. And so he was going to put up one of these people to debate whoever the PhD was going to be. And then P.Z. Myers suggested that we do a double debate so that he could put up two PhDs from Answers in Genesis University. Believe it or not, that's what they call it. And P.Z. would be in this debate on one condition, as long as I remain in the debate as his partner. And I was very happy with PZ for that, because he said he was just going to sit down and let me go. And Ken Ham did not comment anymore. He'd already accepted the debate. It was just a matter of who was it going to be. And then when it was decided who it was going to be, he wouldn't say a word. He wouldn't return emails, nothing. It was all dropped.
Of course, he will post your photograph on his Facebook page, which I saw this last week, where he said something about the darkness in your soul. I don't know, was it the darkness in your soul or something along those lines? What was the point of that again? I don't really get it. Why did he post your picture?
Oh, because his followers are people that easily envision themselves as carrying torches and pitchforks. And this is the sort of audience he pleads to. So you get somebody that looks like me, and there you go. You should have seen what he did with my wife a month or two ago. Back in August, there was some radio show that was working in concordance with Answers in Genesis, and they were making fun of my wife. Ken Ham put her video on his page, and he was making fun of her, talking about how she didn't understand science. Much the same as Ken Ham later said that Bill Nye, the Science Guy, didn't understand science. So I think my wife is now in good company, because we have an anti-science pseudoscientist who says that all the great scientists, and my wife, the science teacher, don't understand science.
AronRa, before I let you go, I've asked this question before. I'll ask it to you. If there was somebody you would put in there in February to have the debate, who would you pick, if anyone?
Now, surprisingly, I mean, if you're going to argue science, really, I mean, Ken Miller would be a good one. And he's Christian, but he's also a textbook author, and he's invaluable as an advocate for legitimate science. You can be a Christian and not be a creationist at all.
Like Francis Collins.
Exactly.
And the Catholic Church. Actually, come to think of it. Like the entire Catholic Church. Of course, that brings about the question, how does one embrace the true, divinely inspired and perfect Word of God, the book of Genesis, the origin story in Genesis chapter 1, and not yet believe that it is absolute truth? It's a weird compartmentalization going on there, or rationalization, rather, don't you think?
I was in Houston a year or so ago, and I happened to be there on the same weekend when Ken Miller was also there, and they said that he was giving some kind of a presentation just a few miles from where I was, and I was excited. I said, well, let's go. I'd love to meet him. And then I realized it was a church that he was in, and he wasn't giving a science presentation. He has what he describes as very traditional views, Catholic views, but very traditional Catholic beliefs. And I thought, I respect this man for his science. I don't want to listen to him in church, because that would just ruin the image of how I respect him in science.
We'll watch the event in February, and of course, we're in Nye's corner and rooting for reason to prevail. We'll see what happens. Aron, thanks for a perspective and for being part of the show once again. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
So what would a firebrand like, I don't know, David Silverman, the president of American Atheist, have to say about all this? Well, I was curious. So I dropped David a line and I asked him if he'd do a few minutes on the show tonight and give us his perspective. He's no stranger to going out there and stirring the pots and blatantly calling out the ridiculousness of the creationist claim. And he joins me on the air tonight. David Silverman, glad you're here.
My pleasure. It's great to be on the show, Seth.
Man, I'm amazed at how often I see you on Fox News. I mean, do you just have a brass nameplate on the desk over there and they just bring you in, every week or so? It's amazing.
Not yet, but I am the first, as far as I know, I am the first atheist to have a regular recurring spot on a national news show just to give the atheist perspective on issues of the day.
I'm glad to see you out there doing it. You do a great job. You're polished, you're even-toned, you're even-tempered, you're positive. I don't know how you keep from popping. My head would pop off, right? There's four people, including the host, all yelling at each other over a 4-minute segment, and I don't know how you keep your composure. It's insane.
It's like a game. It's like a game, and it's like a contest. Can I squeeze in talking points in between the rabbi and the priest and the host? Can I get my point across, and maybe I can swing in a little bit of a plug or a dig or something that'll help the organization and help the movement. And every time that I make those points, every time that I win that game, we normalize atheism. And that's really the whole big point here. It's normalizing atheism. And it's not so much what I say when I'm on there. It's the fact that they keep bringing me back on that puts atheists in front of people, that puts atheists in front of specifically Fox News audiences, that brings atheism into the realm of the regular, which is the big picture. And that's what I'm trying to do.
I know you've debated before. I saw you on stage going head-to-head with Dinesh D'Souza, one of our favorite apologists out there. So you're no stranger to the arena of a debate. What's your take on the whole Bill Nye Ken Ham thing coming up?
Well, I like debates. I feel pretty strongly. A lot of people say, well, we don't want to legitimize religion by arguing it. But religion is already, their argument is not legitimate, but religion is legitimate in our society. And we can't close our eyes and say, well, their argument is stupid, therefore we're not going to pay any attention to them. No, we have to. They're in control. They're in charge. And we're going to take it from them. And we're going to take that control from them against their will. And we need to know who these people are, and we need to expose them for the intellectual frauds that they are. And if a preacher gets up in front of a parish and says his pablum over and over and over again, he's never going to get challenged, and none of those people are ever going to see a challenge to him. But if we got this opportunity when it was me and Dinesh D'Souza, I mean, think about how much we learned from Dinesh D'Souza from his debates. If there were no debates, we would not know how void he is of good points. We would think that he was more relevant because he used to work for Ronald Reagan and such. We need to hear them fail, and we need to show people them failing. And I think that the Bill Nye debate is going to be great. I think Bill is going to absolutely wipe the floor with Ken Ham. And I think people need to see it. His people need to see it. And even equally importantly, I think we need to see it. We atheists need to see it. We atheists need to hear how bad Ken Ham does against Bill Nye. Because if we don't, we'll never learn. We'll never see it. A good example, look at when I go on Bill O'Reilly or when I go on Fox News, when I go on Hannity, a lot of people only watch Bill O'Reilly when I'm on. So if I wasn't on, they would never watch Bill O'Reilly. And then we would not know how daft he is. Tide goes in, tide goes out. Come on. How did the moon get there? Well, we have to know that Bill O'Reilly is or can be that vapid. We need that.
Well, and you have to think that most of the people who are locked into the Fox News culture, you may be their first introduction to a contrary idea, right?
And that must be done. And this is why, I've gone on many stages now talking about firebrand atheism. And I believe that this is why firebrand atheism, going on Fox News, calling them out on their crap, is humanistic. It's the nice guy thing to do. Say, oh, yes, I respect your religious beliefs. Oh, yes, you have your beliefs, I have mine, and we can all sing together, kumbaya. That hurts them because it reinforces that bubble in which they live. When we challenge theists, and when we challenge them without insulting them, but without giving any sort of relevance or respect to their religion, which deserves none, we help them shake that foundation. We chip away at that pedestal on which religion sits in their mind. And it's very important, and I say it's very humanistic. It's the nice guy thing to do. The easy thing to do is to say, you're okay, I'm okay, we all love each other. But the nice guy thing to do is say, yeah, you're okay, but you're also damaged by the religion that was inflicted on you when you were a child. And we need to say that. Somebody needs to say that. And saying that is difficult, but it's also the nice thing to do. It's the good thing to do.
Do you feel that way about the Christmas billboards in Times Square? You think that was compassion? Hey, who needs Christ in Christmas? Is that the compassionate thing to do?
Oh, of course it was compassionate. There's a whole lot of people out there who were dragging themselves to a religious service that they didn't agree with, that they didn't like. And the billboard that we put up in Times Square told them that not only were they not alone, but they didn't need to do all that stuff, and they could still keep their Christmas. That was a nice billboard. There was nothing nasty in it. There was nothing insulting. We didn't say, oh, you're stupid for being religious, anything like that. We don't do anything like that. What we do is challenge the notion that religion is unchallengeable. And that's what chips away at that pedestal.
I thought Sean Hannity was going to burst into flames on the exchange you guys had over the Christmas billboard. I mean, he couldn't sit still. It was awesome.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great? I mean,
it was a beautiful moment.
To watch them fluster and flubber, and when I go on the Richard Carlson show and I tell Shmuley Bateach, oh, your religion is no better than the Satanists. Well, guess what? It's not. But he needs to hear it. He needs to hear it. People need to understand that their religion is not better than everybody else's, because that's the only way we're going to achieve a pluralistic society.
Well, you did score the best line when I saw it was the last exchange on the on Gretchen's show. You and a couple of apologists, and you just said it outright. Religion is a superstition. They were speaking in terms of, well, there's superstition and then there's our religion, and you just eliminated the distinction, and you had the best line of the exchange. Well, actually, religion is a superstition, and both of those guys about burst into flames.
I know. I love that. I really do enjoy going on television with these guys. I mean, there's that factor too. I do enjoy going on and making their heads explode with, again, the things that people don't hear but need to hear. Okay, right. People need to hear that religion is a superstition. They need that sentence to be said within their earshot so that people know, so that those wheels can start turning. Well, what exactly is the difference? And then you may remember the priest started saying, oh, well, the difference between religion and superstition is personal revelation, which is the lamest argument possible because, I think it's a religion, therefore it's a religion. It deserves respect. We wouldn't hear that line if I didn't go on Fox News and I didn't debate this guy and we didn't have that exchange. And I think we're better for having heard that kind of thing.
Not to digress too much very quickly, I'm just curious, what's Gretchen Carlson's attitude toward you when the cameras aren't rolling? I mean, is she cordial? Is she pleasant? Do you guys have a rapport, or does she treat you like the Antichrist? I'm just curious.
No. Gretchen is a professional, straight down to the bone. She's a professional. We do disagree, of course, on religion, but it's not like Hannity, who's really kind of a butthead all the time.
Yeah.
Gretchen is not a butthead, and she's cordial and she's polite, and she treats me well.
Good for. Well, I was just wondering if they had they put you in a special room and had incense and crosses on the walls and stuff. I just.
That they bring me in, they send me a limo, they bring me into the studio, they sit me in the green room, they give me cookies and coffee, and then they send me home. It's very cordial, it's very pleasant.
David Silverman, by the way, we're looking forward to the National Convention coming up in Salt Lake City in April. Details are on your website, atheist.org, and we'll see you here in a few months, and best wishes. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Seth. Always a pleasure.
I had an email in from a listener named John who said this: I'm a student studying paleontology at a university in Texas. I've had the opportunity to interact with creationists in both an academic and a casual setting, and let me tell you, after having spoken with many creationists, I think that what Nye has done is a terrible mistake. Creationists do not deserve to be debated. They deserve to be educated. Debates implied that there is something to debate. But we solved this problem years ago, and creation is simply not a viable model of origins. In any other setting, a scientist or educator has the ability to fact-check and answer every question. Not so here. Ham has stacked the deck against Nye from the get-go, and the debate shouldn't have to occur in the first place. Debating Ham in this kind of setting gives gullible or uneducated people the impression that there is an actual controversy here, when in reality, none exists. John, thanks very much for the message. Greatly appreciated. Stephen sent an email in that said this: it may have served a useful purpose in the past, but I think pretty much everything has been said that there is to say. Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris, Dennett, and AronRa, among many others, have all participated in such debates, and the results have always been the same. No amount of logic or common sense will sway the opinions of the opinionated. Mick sent a message and said, this is a tricky one. The standard objections to the debates are that scientists give credibility to the creationists, and that any creationist can do the gish gallop and simply inundate the scientists with enough crap that they simply don't have enough time to untangle it. I think in addition to these, there's also the presuppositionalist mindset that many spectators will have. The desire to believe is stronger than the desire to know, and very few minds will be changed. On the other hand, the creationist falsehoods do need to be exposed for the fraud that they are. I'm cautiously optimistic that Nye will have the faculties to deal with Ham. I just hope it'll be a fair and level debate. Dr. Richard Carrier is no stranger to the debate arena. He has spoken and debated and essentially represented free thought and skeptical thinking all around the world. He's a professional historian, published philosopher. His books include Proving History, Bayes' Theorem, and The Quest for the Historical Jesus, Sense and Goodness Without God, Not the Impossible Faith, The End of Christianity, Why I Am Not a Christian, and much, much more. And he joins us for a few minutes on the air tonight. Dr. Richard Carrier, thanks for being here.
Not a problem. Glad to be here.
A lot of opinions on the show tonight about the upcoming debate, Bill Nye-KEN Ham, and I wanted to know if you wanted to weigh in with your opinion. What do you think?
I've been increasingly convinced by the critics of this. I really don't see a net positive here, for a number of reasons. I mean, it's already been pointed out that Bill Nye has no experience or skill as a debater, and he's not an expert in evolution science or even counter-apologetics, which is kind of more important here. Both of those failings could be mitigated with extensive study and preparation. I know people who can do it. I can do it. But in my experience, people like Bill Nye at that level, they're often too overconfident to actually devote much time to this kind of study. They might not even be aware of how difficult coming off well in a debate is. So that's a big worry for me as to what extent he's actually going to prepare for this debate. And this is the case especially against a very experienced demagogue like he's going to go up against. And they often have no idea how their opponents have spent years developing ways to smokescreen and shotgun even evolutionary scientists, much less someone who doesn't have a vast database of expertise to call upon to trip them up in turn. So that worry is valid. But also, and if you look at the whole structure of this thing, I mean, it's explicitly a money-making scheme for the Creation Museum. I mean, it's all set up that way, which makes Bill Nye essentially a paid PR man for creationism, which why would Bill Nye agree to do that? That's a worrying thing as well. At least I have to say, I hope he's being paid.
Yeah.
Well, it's just the entire event is set up to maximize profits from the use of Nye's name and presence. So that's basically like hiring some celebrity to be the face man for your movement.
Well, let's take a look at the larger picture. You do a lot of debates against people who come to you with false history, right?
Yeah.
And yet you give them the time of day and you agree to appear on stage with them. So you don't think the overall question of should we give these people forum is one that should be just brushed away? You will actually see merit in going head to head, yes?
Yes. And that's a good point, because that's the way I was trying to think about this is how would I handle this if I were as famous as Bill Nye? If I were asked to do this, I would insist on a neutral venue, like a university. And I'd insist that the event be jointly sponsored by the Christian Campus Group, whatever that is, and the Secular Student Alliance. And I've done this before. And that all profits should be shared equally between those. So that when you go in there, you're making money for the atheist movement as well as for the creationist movement. No one's getting ahead in the money game there. And that neutral venue also, I would also require by contract that the full unedited video would be provided to and owned independently by both sponsors. So neither sponsor could prevent the other from using it. And that would keep the Christian side honest. This is a thing that I've run into many times in the past, is that the video gets buried or disappeared or gets edited, but all the rights are held by the Christian side so that you can't bring out the real video to expose it. But if we had, it would keep them honest if they released a deceitfully edited video of this and the Secular Student Alliance was allowed to release the raw video exposing the lie, right? So if they were under that gun, they would be more honest in editing the video. But so this particular situation, you got to think about these kinds of things. That neutral venue and that, sharing of the rights and the profits and all of that has to be a major feature of it. And I don't see that happening here. It looks like it's all just a money-making scheme for the Creation Museum. It's all geared their way. And, I imagine if Bill Nye even gets a percentage of the take of others, of the sales of the DVD and stuff like that, I doubt it's 50-50. And if it is, he should be making a big point of that. He should be going out and saying, hey, I'm going to get as much money as they are, and I can use that money to promote evolution science. So it's fair, it's equitable arrangement kind of thing financially. But I don't see him talking about that and saying that. I mean, that would be a big selling point for him to make that point if that were the case. I doubt it's the case. He's probably only getting, the maybe 15%, 10% max, if he even thought to get a percentage of that part of it.
It's been interesting to watch Bill Nye, from a guy who went from educator and entertainer to somebody who's really activist. I mean, it seems to be a recent fire in his belly to be able to go out and say what, at least in the United States of America, unfortunately,
really true,
are very controversial things. What do you think's going on with that guy? You think he's just come to the point where he's just fed up and he's too old to care? And I mean, what's going on,
I don't know. I haven't been following Bill Nye's career enough to see the transition or to know what might have motivated it. That would be a good question to ask Bill Nye, frankly.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on the show. He'd definitely be slumming. Hey, Bill, you want to come do the radio show? Well, Dr. Carey, I just wanted to hear a perspective from you. Yeah. I knew you'd kind of sort of follow this type of thing, and you do a lot of debate. Have you personally had experience with somebody who's gone in and unfairly edited words you've said, or maybe excerpted great points you might have made and you found out about it after the fact?
Usually what happens is the video gets buried. If you perform well in the debate, suddenly they lose the video. Oh, sorry, we lost the video. And so the video doesn't get put out. And they only put out video when they do really well, right? That has actually happened to me several times. Even in cases where I've had a contract guaranteeing that I would get the video, they would make up an excuse for how it got deleted or something.
Yeah, we had a fire. Something like that.
Yeah, so even you can't even protect yourself with a contract.
Yeah.
So it's really sleazy, that is. But I have had situations where the videos have been re-edited. When I did the national TV debate with William Lane Craig, this was on PAX, way back when PAX was a national network that existed. It was a Christian network, and Lee Strobel had a TV show, Faith Under Fire, and nationally broadcast show on this Christian network. And he brought me on to debate William Lane Craig on the resurrection. And when we did that, we did it by satellite feed, pre-recorded, and I did about 15 minutes of talking, and Craig did about 15 minutes of talking. And then on the live aired edition, they only used 7 minutes. But in the live edition, it was really well edited. Like, it was very fair. I was really impressed at how fair the editing had been arranged. So the live broadcast was great. But then several years later, they produced a DVD that was part of kind of like a Christian education unit kind of thing. They've sort of packaged it as this sort of Bible study thing. And they took the live feed and then re-edited some of the raw video back in. And they did that very dishonestly, so that it's definitely a misrepresentation of how the debate actually went. And so I've seen that happen, and it can easily happen in other cases.
What would Jesus do? Would Jesus have unfairly edited that debate?
Of course, yeah. They would say that Jesus would, only want to represent the truth, and the truth is, quote unquote, their point of view, right? Not our point of view. So suppressing what atheists have to say, if in their opinion what the atheist is saying is false or wrong, or will destroy the faith of the faithful or whatever, they can come up with excuses for even thinking that even Jesus would act that way. I mean, I've had arguments with theists about this, and that they don't see it as lying, and trying to explain to them that why this is deceitful, why this is dishonest, sometimes is hard to do because they're so set in their thinking as to that they even miscategorize what's true and what's false, right? It's a strange, delusional hall of mirrors that they're stuck in.
By the way, shameless and random plug since we brought up Jesus. I had you autograph Bayes' Theorem and the Quest for the Historical Jesus when I saw you at Skepticon, and I love the book. I'm not done with it, but I love what I've read so far. It's just so well done, so well written, and I mean, from what I've read so far, I have to recommend it to our listeners. It's just really, really well researched, and you're great at sort of explaining things for the layperson. So thank you for that work and for everything you do, sir. It's greatly appreciated.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the praise.
All right. We'll be watching the debate coming up on the 4th of February for sure. And I think this also helps us speak to the larger question of how we engage the religious in the arena of ideas. So thank you so much for your input and for being part of the show, sir.
Sure. No problem. Anytime.
Darren sent a message in and said it's a good idea to debate creationists because the exchange may be the only real exposure to science, evolution, and critical thinking that the listeners get. I don't attempt to sound demeaning. I'm simply stating that there are those who are not well informed of scientific topics. In regards to the concerns of some that debating creationists would only bring them more credibility, we should not let the fear of allowing creation proponents to become more popular halt our progress. Science, reason, and rationality should not sit in the silence and in the shadows. If there's a platform from which the truth can be presented, then we should take our arguments there. If science absolutely disagrees with an idea, but the idea is pronounced as truth by some, then science should make known its stance in regard to the idea. Communication and education are the tools we can use to dislodge the people's faith in religion and pseudosciences. Ed Hensley sent me a message a few days ago. Ed is wired in with the Louisville Atheists and Freethinkers, as well as the Kentucky Secular Society, and those folks have a front row seat to just about everything Ken Ham and the Creation Museum are doing, including this Ark Encounter monstrosity that is supposedly in the progress of being built and coming to fruition. So anyway, Ed said, look, I did some digging and I found some stuff that might be of interest to your listeners. And of course, I wanted to have that information out there if possible. So we're going to have Ed on the show tonight. Ed Hensley, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your evening. Glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
Now, you and I have some history with Ken Ham. We were part of a tour through the Creation Museum in the fall of 2012. That tour resulted in the infamous video that Ken Ham himself posted on his own Facebook page called Atheists at the Creation Museum. Anyway, Ed and I go way back, and he dropped me a line and said he had some info on the whole Ken Ham, Bill Nye debate and some of the logistics around it that might be interesting. So, Ed, talk to me. What'd you dig up?
First of all, I will talk about all the organizations involved with the Ark theme park. There's the Creation Museum, and there is Crosswater Canyon, which is a nonprofit wholly owned by the Creation Museum. And there is Ark Encounter LLC, which is a for-profit company in Branson, Missouri, at least on paper. And the funds from the Ark bonds that I'll talk about in just a second are going to go to Crosswater Canyon and Ark Encounter LLC. So they're both a Kentucky company and a Missouri company, and they're both a not-for-profit and a for-profit. It really gets pretty complicated. The biggest problem I have with the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate is the timing. They need to get $55 million in bonds by February 6th, or they have to give back $26 million. They will be automatically returned to the investors. So they need to raise about $29 million more in about a month. And that's probably not going to happen either way, but this debate gives them an opportunity to raise that money. Look what we're doing. We're debating the great scientist Bill Nye, and they will probably do so even more after the debate, February 4th, try to get a push the next 2 days. I wish he would have waited at least until March to do the debate.
Let me come back to the organizations that you mentioned. They are all funding or behind, or they're parent companies of the Ark Encounter, these different companies, different names?
Crosswater Canyon is wholly owned by Answers in Genesis. Ark Encounter LLC is supposedly a separate for-profit company. Crosswater Canyon is in Petersburg, Kentucky. One thing that is a lot of people are not aware, they're not going to build the Ark at the Creation Museum, which is in Petersburg, Kentucky. The Ark theme park will be in Williamstown, Kentucky, which is 45 minutes from the Creation Museum. The Ark Encounter shares its address, 500 West Main Street, Suite 401, Branton, Missouri, with 4 other companies that are all registered in Missouri. And they also share the same registering agent, which is kind of... it's not incredibly unusual for several companies to have the exact same mailing address, but it's not really a real company. In order to get some information, I signed up online that expressed interest in the Answers in Genesis Ark Bonds at arkbonds.com, and they started calling me, and so I went along with them. One of the callers, when I was asking some of these questions about their different companies, he told me point blank, Answers in Genesis is in charge of everything. Those other companies are in existence for sales tax rebates from the state of Kentucky. They're in existence because of people that they know in Missouri who have similar parts like Silver Dollar City that they work with and were able to get through the Missouri laws really easily. So they had other reasons for doing that. But it is really confusing with all the different companies in different locations of different status. And I can see why investors are not that confident in purchasing these bonds. Some other interesting thing, America's Research Group was the group that did the research that made the attendance projections for the Ark Park. And they had projected 1.2 million on the conservative end to 2 million on the high end for their first year attendance. One little fact that's kind of omitted in all their statements is that the CEO and chairman, Britt Beamer, has co-authored a book with Ken Ham. That book is titled Already Gone. So it cannot be said that America's Research Group is non-biased when the CEO of the company is a co-author with Ken Ham on a book.
Well, take me back to the phone call, right? You're on the phone, you're expressing curiosity, and they are wanting to pitch what? I mean, is it 10 grand? Is it 15, 20? What's the deal?
Well, I was trying to be honest when I clicked on the things online, and there wasn't anything for $0 what you want to get. So I chose the smallest amount, which was $5,000. They had it up to $100,000 or $200,000. And I spoke with 2 different people who have called me. One of them said, well, I'm not sure if you're planning on giving $100,000 or $200,000. He was talking in that area, wow. Which, of course, even if I wanted to give that, I don't have the money to give that. But that's what they were pitching. They answered some of my questions about why is this in Missouri? Why is this in Kentucky? Why is it for-profit? Why is it non-profit? And one of the answers was kind of strange. He blamed part of their funding problem on Obamacare. He said that they were going to do this at first as a for-profit company, but with the new healthcare rules, their insurance would have to pay for the abortion pill, and they did not want to do that, so they were going to do this bonding through the municipality of Williamstown in order to somehow bypass that. That was probably the strangest part of the phone call.
Ed, you had signed up to the live stream back when it was a $5 subscription. Now that's been changed, right? It's a free stream?
Yes.
Okay. So how did they handle that? If you'd already signed up for the $5 deal, did they refund your money or what?
They did refund the money. Here is how that whole series of events came about. We had about 12 atheists in Kentucky online ready to purchase tickets to the museum. We wanted to go and clap and cheer for Bill Nye when he did something well, and at least be some kind of support there. And within 1 minute, all 900 tickets to the event were sold out. This is another major problem that I had with the event, is that the ticket sales were not done through an independent organization like Ticketmaster. Everything was controlled by Creation Museum. And it is entirely possible that they pre-allocated hundreds of these tickets to known members and people who have been paying throughout, who have year-long or lifetime memberships and big donors and churches. And it just gave the illusion that it was open to the public. I don't really think that it was.
Well, thanks for your perspective on all this, Ed. I know you're pretty close to it being right on top of the Creation Museum out there. And thanks for keeping the non-faith in Kentucky. You give us hope, my friend.
Thank you very much for all you do.
Many people have asked me what I think about the upcoming February 4th event with Ken Ham and Bill Nye, and I'll be absolutely honest. I don't know what to think. I said in a recent blog post that I think it's a bad idea as far as it's Ken Ham's home turf. There's no such thing as bad publicity for Ham, I don't think. I don't think he really cares. As long as his name's in the headlines, people are talking, he can play victim. Oh, those evil scientists and evolutionists are coming after us. I need your money. So I'm convinced that no matter what happens, he's going to sort of translate all of this fervor into money. And I think ultimately the Ark Encounter will get built. Anyone remember back when Oral Roberts was building the City of Faith? He's building this big, ornate hospital building that would almost look like a spacecraft, And even people within the mainstream Christian community were decrying this. This is insane. This is nuts. What, he saw a 900-foot-tall Jesus? That's why he's building it? This is crazy. But he got it built anyway. It went bankrupt a few years later, but he got it built. And I kind of have a suspicion the same's going to happen with Ken Ham. I think the Ark Encounter ultimately will happen. I hope not. I hope that thing never comes to fruition, because we all know what it's going to be. It's going to be another house of guilt, just like the Creation Museum. And blind Christian parents are going to cart their little offspring, little ducklings in through this thing. And look, it's Noah and the animals. What a beautiful story. Isn't the Bible a wonderful book? And, it's going to inhibit how much they really know about the world and possibly negatively affect the rest of their lives. And that's not an over-exaggeration. I really do think if you kill curiosity in a child and you get them thinking, I was born worthless and I require an invisible sky king to give me worth, and every word in the Bible is automatically true, even if it can't be supported or substantiated, you've damaged kids. And so I'd like to see the Ark Encounter and everything like it, the Creation Museum. I'd like to see it all with brown paper on the windows, just like you would, right? And I look at this debate and I think, he's probably going to cash in. The romantic in me wants Bill Nye to just knock it out of the park. Just go in there and just all pistons firing, just nail it. No matter what Ken Ham throws out, no matter what ambush takes place, no matter what verbal grenades are volleyed from the other side, Bill Nye is ready. And that could happen, even though he's not an experienced debater. He knows an awful lot about an awful lot, and he's a great communicator, and there's every possibility that he'll go in there and do a wonderful job. And that's what I hope. I really do hope that the vast majority of the people who are, let's face it, they're watching outside of the venue itself. They're on the internet and they're watching. The news media is watching from the outside in. And they'll see, over here you got a guy selling guilt porn, and a story of a dirt man and a rib woman and a talking snake. And the reason the Nazis existed is because you rejected Jesus and all that stuff. And over here is going to be a legitimate guy who has been a science educator for decades, who is giving you peer-reviewed, credible, supportable, demonstrable scientific information. And the contrast will be so great, it will be almost impossible to ignore. I would love to see that happen. And in the meantime, between now and then, like you, I'm just going to watch and see what does happen. I think we'll be watching the debate. We'll see what happens after the debate. And we'll continue to root for the science community to go out and be able to counter this nonsense that's being fed into the minds and hearts of these young people out there. Well, not just young people, but their parents and grandparents. For my part, it was a debate between a religious person and an atheist that actually caused me to start asking questions and embracing doubt, and provide the catalyst for me to be able to bust out of my religious cocoon and embrace the real world. In fact, if it hadn't been for me stumbling upon a debate between a religious person and an atheist, this site and community might not even exist. So maybe I'm biased, but I continue to think that we should have the discussion out there with parameters, right? Not so someone else can profiteer, not so someone else can unfairly edit. We'll have to have some standards in place. We'll have to have some parameters set. But if you can do that on a level playing field, meaning that no one else can come in and stack a deck in their favor, but you just make it all about the information, I myself think that these discussions not only should exist, they must exist. And they must continue. And perhaps in another 10 years, the statistics that show that half of Americans believe in Adam and Eve will have become diminished. More and more people will have embraced science and reason. More and more people will see the world for how it truly is. Maybe more and more minds will have been opened. It's certainly something we should hope for, and more than that, it's something I think we should continue to work toward. Thank you so much to all my special guests and to our listeners for a great show tonight. Next Tuesday night, Dr. AronRa is going to join us as we talk about religion and shame. Next Tuesday night on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.